All right, everybody. Welcome back to Strongman Personal Finance. Today, we're going to review Basic Economics by Thomas Sowell, a very famous economist. And you are going to like this video because you are going to like this review. And you're going to subscribe to my channel because I'm going to teach you some basic economic concepts that I learned from this book that you need to know if you want to defeat socialists and communist losers in debates. Okay? Anyway, let's talk about this book. What does this book do for you? What does basic economics do? Is it going to make you a world-class economist? No, it's not. Am I a world-class economist? I wish, but I'm actually an accountant, okay? I don't have a master's degree or PhD in economics, okay? And I'm definitely not a socialist and a communist economist. But I know a little bit about economics because I had to study for the CPA exam and all that good stuff, and I took classes in college. But this book is still a great refresher about the basic concepts of economics. And it is written in a way that is easy to understand, as long as you have a basic understanding of the subject matter. And if you're interested, okay? I know a lot of you are too busy watching sports ball and Kim Kardashian to worry about economics and understanding how your country actually functions economically. But that's a different story. So in this review, I'm going to go through the chapters, there's multiple chapters, but there's also subsections which have chapters in them that he talks about, okay? Now, the main subsections are prices and markets, how prices are determined, how markets work in both capitalist and communist economies, aka loser economies, industry and commerce, profit and loss, stuff like that, work and pay, including the minimum wage, a favorite topic of socialists that they love to just increase, $50 an hour for everybody. Time and risk, where he talks about stocks and bonds and investing and the time value of money and present value. The national economy, gross domestic product, how the money system works, how the banking system works. International trade, what are the trends in international trade? What are the advantages that different countries have? Whether you have absolute advantages or comparative advantages. And then he talks about special economic issues, where he just kind of wraps up the book. But each one of these topics does a great summary of the economics process, or how the economics profession works, how it is. And there's not many charts or numbers. So even you liberal arts people that contribute so much to our economy, you might be able to understand this book, okay? So the first section is prices and markets, where he explains how prices are determined in a market. And basically, it's supply and it's demand. And it's based on what kind of country you live in. For example, let's say you live in a capitalist country and you have 3 companies that are selling bananas. Well, in a capitalist country, those companies compete to get that product to you and give you the best service and at the lowest cost because they are the lowest price because they want to defeat their competitors and gain the most market share. And the only way they defeat their competitors are by convincing you to buy their product, whether it's a higher quality, a better value, or whether it's at an affordable price with great service. Now, in a capitalist economy, usually one business will tend to dominate because they provide the best service. People choose voluntarily to buy bananas from one company because they're the best price or they provide the best service or whatever. And that company wins in the long run. Now, the other companies can either innovate and stay competitive by giving better service or by getting their products to the consumers at lower prices, or they fail. And the best company wins because it provides the most value. That's in a capitalist economy. The companies are incentivized to treat you well and to give you a good product as quickly as possible. Whereas you compare that to a communist, loser society or a socialist society, there are no competing enterprises. It's literally just the government providing for you. It's a bureaucrat sitting in an office. Well, I think each person needs 2 bananas per week. And so we're going to, have this many bananas produced. This person is determining how many bananas are produced, how many resources are allocated, and the price of those bananas, which could be well above or well below the actual price that they should be at. So in a capitalist economy, you're going to have much lower prices when there's competition, as opposed to a communist or socialist economy where some bureaucrat is trying to figure it out from some office across the country, okay? Market participants determine the final prices based on supply and demand, okay? That's kind of the first section. That's a brief summary. There's a lot more in there, but it's a great explanation of how prices work. And it kind of enlightens you, and it kind of shows you that people don't necessarily, or companies don't necessarily price gouge you or try to rip you off when they're in a competitive environment, okay? The next thing, industry and commerce. Basically, he talks about the role of profit and loss in an economy. When you have profit, that means the company is doing something right. It's providing value to its customers in a capitalist economy. When you have losses, that company is doing something wrong. Either they're paying their employees too much, or they're paying too much for their products, or they have too much waste in their products. They're doing something wrong. And when a company loses money, that tells the company to either fix their crap or get out of the industry entirely. So eventually the market kind of sorts itself out. The most productive processes that give the most value to their customers are successful in the long run. And companies that suck at their given industry, if they have losses over the long run, eventually that company's going to shut down. Now you compare that to a freaking socialist country where losses don't matter because everything is controlled by the government. So even if something is crap and somebody provides terrible service, or an industry provides terrible service and charges high prices, it doesn't matter because there's no competition, okay? That's a basic economic concept. Competition generally lowers prices. Whereas if there's no competition, like in a monopoly, which can happen in capitalist countries sometimes, but is prevalent and basically overarching in communist countries or socialist countries, prices don't matter. I mean, whatever the government determines the price to be is what they will put on their product. And if the company's losing, if the company or the government enterprise is losing money, it doesn't matter. Okay? You don't want to live in a communist country. All right, next thing, work and pay. Basically, this chapter kind of says that your work and your pay is based on your productivity. Now, you could live in a resource-rich country, but if you don't have, the capital assets, and you don't have the education to convert those raw materials into a product that people want, both in your country and around the globe, then you're not going to be paid that much, or it's not even going to be worth doing that business in your country altogether. However, if you live in a country where you're highly educated and you have a very developed infrastructure and machinery and whatever, you can produce those assets or those products at a much more efficiently, and it might actually be worth producing those products in a country. So the whole concept is that you don't necessarily, just because you have a bunch of resources in your country, if you don't have the educated workforce or the machinery or whatever to produce stuff from those resources, then it's not going to happen in your country. People aren't going to invest in your country to produce those resources, okay? But if you're productive and you're educated and your country's very well developed, you can make raw materials into finished products much more efficiently, okay? And that kind of determines your pay. Your pay is also determined by your skill set, the rarity of your skill, and supply and demand. So companies compete for labor, Laborers compete for jobs, but companies also compete for labor. And if you think about it, if a company, let's say it's a janitorial service, do you think there's a lot of people that can be a janitor or can become janitors if they needed to? Yes, they can. If somebody's desperate and they don't have a job, they'll take a janitorial job if they actually need the money, okay? It's a low skill job. And therefore, if there's a lot of supply of labor and not much demand by industry or for janitorial services, the pay is going to be low because the supply of people that are willing to do the work is high. Now, if nobody wanted to be a janitor, that would actually increase the wages of janitorial services or janitorial workers, or they'd be replaced by machinery. However, if you have a very in-depth skill set, you are very good at something. like computer engineering or accounting, being a CPA. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? If you have a very rare skill set that companies really need, but it's hard to find the labor because too many people don't want to do those hard things, well, you're going to be paid more because companies are competing to pay to get those employees because they are very productive. They have a very rare skill set. So your pay is also determined by your skill set, not by how hard you work. That's something you need to understand, okay? So that's why minimum wages are BS, because a government mandating that a company pays somebody that doesn't produce, let's say, $15 of value, if the government mandates that company pay that person $15 of value, the company, if it's not profitable, is going to either cut that employee's hours or replace them with machinery or more capital assets to offset the cost of labor, okay? So raising the minimum wage to whatever isn't going to solve anything. It's just going to reduce employment in the economy overall as labor becomes more expensive. It's more expensive than it's worth on an economic level, and it's just going to screw you over. So just because people in Europe have high minimum wages doesn't mean it's good. It also means that there's higher unemployment in Europe, especially for younger people or for minorities, okay? So the minimum wage is not this miraculous thing that's going to solve all the problems. And you would know that if you read this freaking book, okay? Now we're going to talk about time and risk, where people choose to invest in stocks or bonds for different reasons. Now, in order to entice somebody to invest, you need to have a stable political and economic environment. Let's say you live in a war-torn country like Iraq, okay, or Syria or whatever. Would you be confident that if you invested your money, that business wouldn't be destroyed by a bomb or some rebels would come and confiscate all your crap? No, you don't have that confidence because the environment of the country you're investing in is so chaotic that you don't know if, even if you had a good business idea, you don't know if it's going to come to fruition. All right? But if you live in a country that has a good rule of law, that has low crime, that has a stable political environment that's conducive to capitalism, don't you think people would rather invest their money in those countries versus more war-torn or more communistic countries where they'll seize your assets at a moment's notice? Yes. That is why countries that are more capitalistic and that are more friendly to businesses attract more investable dollars from around the world. That's how companies are formed, and that's how jobs are created. If you provide a good, safe environment for business to flourish, your country will attract capital inflows, okay? If you live in a socialist country or a country that's tending towards socialism or that has a bunch of chaos, people aren't going to want to invest there, because why would you invest your money if some stinky communist is just going to take over your business because you're a bad person if you don't give me your money? Why would you invest, okay? That's something this book talks about. And also, you need to be compensated for the risk you're taking. Now, bondholders, somebody that issues or buys bonds from a company, they're actually entitled to payments before the stockholders get paid. And the bondholders get a steady stream of payments. So they actually have lower risk when they invest or they lend money to a company than a common stockholder, which is why stocks are expected to have a higher rate of return in the long run. That's why like if a bond paid more money than a stock, why would you invest in a company at all? If the bond paid more, there's no point, especially if you have a lower expected return from stock investing. Everybody would just pile into bonds and nobody would invest in companies, okay? So there's a lot that goes into bond investing, stock investing, risks, rewards, and all that determines the expected rate of return and how and whether your economy flourishes in the long run, okay? I actually really enjoyed that chapter, the time and risk chapter, because it really went into detail about how markets work and how capital is allocated and who determines it and why capital is allocated. Investing happens more in some countries than in others. And most of it is because people want assurances that they will get some kind of return for their money. So if you elected Bernie Sanders, for example, in America, that would crush innovation. That would crush investing in the United States because people would be terrified of investing when some stinky communist like old Bernie is just going to come in and steal their crap. Okay? That is one reason that socialism is complete and utter trash. But you don't care. Okay? All right. Moving on to the next chapter. We talk about the national economy, where he kind of explains the concept of gross domestic product, which is all the goods and final goods and services produced within a country's borders. And he talks about money and the banking system. Now, he goes into the fractional reserve banking system, which is how banks can lend out. They basically create money because they can lend out money, but also show a balance in their deposits inside the banking system. For example, if a bank is allowed by the Federal Reserve to lend out 50% of its deposits so they can make money, well, when you deposit $1,000 into the banking system, that bank will show you that you have a $1,000 balance, but they also lend out half of that, $500, to somebody else. And that gets deposited back into the banking system. So really, the bank has created money because now there's $1,500 of money in the banking system. Now, you may think, oh my God, they're just creating money and they're stealing. Well, banks play a very important role in the economy. Banks help allocate resources, and they have the ability to allocate resources to their best uses. For example, would you directly lend $20,000, let's say your entire savings, to one mortgage, to one homeowner? No, you wouldn't, because you don't know, you're not confident that person will actually repay their loan. What banks can do is they can pool everybody's money together, and they can lend to hundreds or thousands of different homeowners, and they can determine, based on their experience, because they do it 24/7, whether that person is likely to pay or not. And if they are unlikely to pay, or they're less likely to pay, they know what corresponding interest rate to charge. Banks are better, because they do it all the time, that's what they do, they're better at assessing risks. They are better at producing or putting money where it will most likely make you money and make the bank money and help the economy grow, okay? That's a vital role that banks play, all right? And this chapter goes into a bunch of other stuff. But basically it talks a lot about the banking system, the fractional reserve banking system, and all sorts of other things. And it kind of shows you how banks aren't just these greedy men that are stealing your money. They actually have a very, very important role in the economy, okay? Next, we go into international trade, where he talks about how free markets apply both within countries and around the globe, and that free trade is not necessarily bad. Now, the downside for some people in a country is there might be cheaper labor in another country, and that actually can destroy some jobs in a country. But what that does is that moves those people into jobs where they can actually do better work, where they have an advantage over other countries. So in the aggregate, even though let's say a foreign country may hurt some jobs within a country because they can produce products at lower wages and the companies outsource, in the aggregate, it actually helps the country move it or use its employees or its people and puts them to work in fields where they are better suited to work. So he kind of talks about international trade, and I'm not a complete expert at it, but basically if you apply the concepts of free markets where money flows and production flows to where it is best produced, where its best uses are, you can kind of see how international trade, while it may hurt some people, like people in the Midwest in the United States, because jobs are outsourced, in the aggregate, it helps shift people and resources within the United States to work where they could actually produce and have an advantage over foreign countries, okay? That's kind of what he talks about in international trade. And like I said, I'm not a complete expert on it. I'm still learning myself, but it's a very interesting chapter. And then finally, he just summarizes the book at the very end in the Special Economics Issues chapter, okay? Overall, this is an awesome book, okay? I hope I summarized some of the chapters for you. There's a lot more in it, but all of these concepts that I discussed, they are laid out in extremely easy detail in this book. This is an excellent book that will educate you and will provide you basic information on how the economy actually works and how communists and socialists are literally just thieving scum and they're dumb. Okay? So if you stuck with me this long, congratulations. Get this book. I got it from the library for free. It's probably in your library. Check it out. Read it. Hopefully you stay interested and can finish it. And then like and subscribe to my channel. You guys have a wonderful day.